Good evening, good afternoon to all of you, scholars, researchers, and professors alike. Welcome to our Universal Philosophical Community, the White Tower. Today's guest is Daniel Del Monte from University of Philadelphia, USA. Good afternoon, Professor Daniel. So happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Dimitrios. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you as well. DESPOINA MANDRATZI is also with us. DESPOINA, we're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
Very glad to have you here with us today. DESPOINA has studied in the National Technical University of Athens, and also she's a teacher of classical piano, and she also has a master's degree from the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, and also she's a PhD candidate in philosophy in Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences. Is that correct, DESPOINA?
Yes, thank you. It is.
Mm-hmm. And also we've got Dr. MADHVI Prasad from India. Good afternoon, Mandi.
Thank you so much for introducing me. Hello, everyone. Actually, I'm outside, so could not, on the video, but I would like to shortly introduce myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently teaching here in India in Amrita University, Bangalore. And I'm very happy that Professor Daniel is here with us. He's very intellectual and he likes to explore lots of topics. That is what I like most to hear about him. And definitely we are going to enjoy this session, and we are excited to hear from you, Dimitrios. Like the way you ask question, it really makes me really excited about all these things. So I'm very happy to join this session. And I will be, attentive and listen to all of you and try to engage with more questions that I feel like. So thank you so much for inviting me here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor MADHVI. Daniel, today you're going to talk to us about soft naturalism.
Yes.
There are quite a few forms of naturalism, like hard naturalism, which focuses more on the test hypothesis criteria based on observation and natural sciences. There is soft naturalism, which gives room for more interpretation based on a subjective experience and social learning, see things from a more social perspective, let's say. There is supernaturalism, which believes in supernatural causes outstripping natural reality. Minimal naturalism, which accounts for a more elaborate naturalistic worldview, let's say, denying the existence of supernatural entities or other forms of naturalist interventions. There is physicalism, sort of ontological monism, which, unlike idealism, dualism, or pluralism, states that there is nothing over and above the physical realm. Today you chose to talk to us about soft naturalism. Can you tell us the reason why?
Yeah, so this position is known as soft naturalism. So it's a variety of naturalism. As you pointed out, there's several different varieties. And in fact, when I presented this paper at the Metaphysical Society of America conference in Atlanta, Georgia in 2025, and DESPOINA was there. She did not attend my talk, but one of the criticisms was that they didn't like the term soft. They had a problem with the adjective soft, and I don't know why. They got very sensitive about it, but it's not something that is meant to be critical. I can also call it non-reductive. And so the idea is that it is a soft naturalism because it's not a hard naturalism. And a hard naturalism would be totally reductive. Okay? And the idea is that in hard naturalism, you can explain everything strictly in terms of material, particles, in space and time. So we can explain human love. We can explain human ingenuity, creativity, the works of Shakespeare, spiritual enlightenment. We can explain all these phenomena which we associate with consciousness, with maybe the soul. Traditionally would be a kind of immaterial ground for it. We associate it instead with just little particles moving around, and they generate this higher level. That would be hard naturalism. Okay, so Professor MADHVI may know what I'm talking about here. There's a poem by Sri Aurobindo, who's a great Indian thinker, and it's called A Dream of Surreal Science. And the idea is that we can explain the works of Shakespeare as just a manifestation of atoms moving around, and they just come together and they produce by chance these works of genius. That would be hard naturalism. So it seems like a kind of an implausible position. It seems something that, as you know, in the poem, it's surreal. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't capture the reality of specifically value. Okay, so there's good and bad. We think in terms of right and wrong, good and bad. Can you explain that in terms of a material process? Well, it seems very difficult. Okay, because good and bad are not clearly material things. Is good and bad something that has like dimensions and space? Can you touch it? Can you see it? Well, no.
So in a sense, soft naturalism opens the way for normative judgment.
Yeah, normative judgment. Yes, you can include normative judgment. It's not reducible. We're not going to try to explain norms in terms of little atoms that have no consciousness, somehow producing something higher. And so soft naturalism says, no, we're not going to say that. There is normative judgment, there is human culture, and it's independent of the natural level. But at the same time, this is very important, there still is a variety of naturalism. It is not a variety of idealism. So you have another metaphysics known as, broadly speaking, idealism. And the idea is here that, well, there's a higher level beyond the natural. So there's objects in space and time. But in addition, there's like a spiritual domain. So for instance, Plato, right? Plato has the physical world in space and time. But what else is there? Well, there's a higher level of forms, and they're not in space and time, and they provide the basis for value, for normativity. You could also have Hegel, and traditionally Hegel is seen as believing in this cosmic Geist. It's the German word for spirit. There's a spirit that is higher than the natural, and that accounts for the phenomena of consciousness, of value. This is idealism, and soft naturalism says, no, we're also not idealist. So you're asking about practical applications of this. Well, this could be a position that allows you to appreciate abstract ideas that are not physical, good, bad, ideas of human dignity, value. You can't touch or see these things. You can't see human dignity, right? It's not something that you can is tangible, but you can still believe it.
Yeah.
Without also adopting an idealist metaphysics.
Yeah, it's very clearly understood. Very well. Yeah. So you have clearly defined as what soft naturalism is. Would you like to say a few more things about, for example, we know that Max Weber's statement, Max Weber says that the rise of science, or what became what we're now, would lead to a disenchantment of traditional humanistic theories like theism. Would you say that there is a struggle among different forms of naturalism to fill the gap between scientific worldview on the one hand and humanistic worldview on the other, with that form of naturalism acting like a go-between and a reconciliating force? And which explanation of naturalism would best bridge that gap, according to your own opinion?
Yeah, so I like the idea you brought up, disenchantment.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that's what we're dealing with here. And maybe DESPOINA knows, this ties into her study of Nietzsche, okay? The idea that the world is no longer infused with a higher purpose. It seems like it's just material stuff, okay? And so we have the scientific worldview, which seems to have, in which God seems to have died.
Like
the death
Nietzsche,
of God, so Nietzsche, right? It's a nihilism. There's just material stuff. And we have the humanistic worldview, which seems distinct. We seem to be outsiders in the universe. We have these aspirations and ideals that seem to be alien to just the mechanical stuff of the universe. So soft naturalism tries to preserve both insights. So they accept a naturalistic metaphysics, but at the same time, they also accept the independence of the humanistic. So if you see on my slide there, the cultural domain has a sui generis substantiality. So the idea there is that the cultural domain is genuinely independent. It's not just atoms whirling around mindlessly. And the human sciences, the study of humanity, literature, religion, philosophy, psychology, these are discontinuous from natural sciences. We can't just explain human behavior in terms of some sort of biochemical process. And so we have the second point there, the intentional domain. This is something that's genuinely discontinuous from the natural. These are our ideas, our activities. So we're biological creatures, but at the same time, we have these new ideas and practices that make us independent from biology. So this is the tightrope, if you will, that soft naturalism tries to walk, trying to have these humanistic and scientific worldviews, combining them.
And what about Kant's belief? Does soft naturalism deny Kant's, let's say, Kant's theory?
Yes. So Kant has this idea of the noumenal. Okay, and the noumenal is this idea of what is beyond possible experience. So we would have an idea of something that we, as human beings, could not possibly experience. Okay, so this could be like the idea of God. God as a being that is not in space nor time. A transcendent being. We couldn't experience that, but we have the idea of it. Okay? Well, the soft naturalist will say, and I have a quote here, Kant's entanglement with noumena is a blunder that must be completely set aside. It has no useful life at all. Okay, so the idea is that any kind of aspiration to think about what could be beyond the natural, what could be beyond our experience, that just makes no sense. It's like we're trying to think about what is beyond thought, and that seems to be just fundamentally contradictory. And so we ought to dismiss that idea. And so we have to stay in this certain framework. We're not going to be completely biological, but neither are we transcendental. Mm-hmm. So we're in this closed framework. We're not strictly biological. We are cultural beings. We have customs. We have practices, language. Okay, these are independent of the biological, right? So your biologist does not determine what language you speak. It's part of a culture, all right? But at the same time, this is not a response to something that is transcendental, that is beyond the natural. So this is why we are historical cultural constructions. So yeah.
All right. So soft naturalism also favors Darwinian evolution, which shows that, as you say, we're fully biological creatures descended from lower animals. So we must streamline the extravagances of Hegel's rhetoric. Would you like to elaborate on this?
Yeah, so this is, and again, emphasizing naturalism. So soft naturalism is still naturalism. We're biological animals. Mm-hmm. We have descended from more prior animalistic forms. And Darwin was correct. We're not like some sort of being made in the image of God. So you think of the fundamental Judeo-Christian position, or maybe Hinduism, where Atman and Brahman are consubstantial. No, we come from the animals. We're biological. Okay, and so we have to get rid of this idea that we find in Hegel, that we're some sort of entity that comes from an absolute spirit. Hegel's rhetoric about a cosmic force, the absolute. This word German geistlich means basically just a spirit, the cosmic spirit, like as if we were following the plan of God or something. We have to streamline that, because that's not the case for the soft naturalist. We are just products of biology. So we also can't have a medieval naturalism. This would be, we recognize the reality of nature, but we see it as rooted in a supernatural first being. So this would be like the medieval view of figures like Aquinas, and people who integrated religion with their philosophy. This is also something that is not acceptable for the soft naturalist. So we have to streamline these extravagances, they say.
Right. So naturalism does not believe in God, and also claims that there's no purpose of the universe, there's no soul or immortality, or any kind of free will. There's no morality, no purpose, or any kind of universal plan, as Darwin also claims. So naturalists think that whatever we plan to do is illusionary, and the behavior of our brain is not proposal. And now the question is, can we organize our lives to add value to ourselves so as to get some sort of personal fulfillment? And is there any meaning or purpose in a human life from a naturalist, soft naturalist perspective?
You know, at the conference, I got a comment from an individual saying that we can still have transcendence, a form of transcendence, as a soft naturalist. So the idea is that you can still have a kind of maybe a spiritual awakening, even though you believe in this disenchanted metaphysics. You believe in this world that has no purpose, no free will, no God. But you can still have a form of transcendence. And my problem, though, is that this is a kind of sophistry that soft naturalism falls into. So ultimately, I'm critical of this view. So maybe if you could go one more slide down. Just one more slide. One more slide. Sorry, one more slide. Just one more up. Go up one. I think slide 8.
Slide 8. Yeah, this is it.
So my first problem, okay, is that in soft naturalism, the idea is that we can form ourselves, okay? So we are independent of the biological. We can shape culture. And that's really how we find meaning. We build our own practices through a historical situation. Okay, so right now, right, we're talking in English. That's our language that we're using in this context. We are forming ideas. We are forming community. We're forming memories. This is something that's independent of the biological, okay? So, however, our idea of what nature is part of our culture. So as we talk, we're talking about what is nature, okay? And that's part of our philosophy, all right? So my question here is, why is the soft naturalist committed to a naturalist metaphysics? Isn't the definition of nature part of our culture? And if it is part of our culture, it should be subject to change, okay? We should be open to revising it, because the cultural is not the biological, okay? So it seems as though the soft naturalist is trying to protect a naturalist metaphysics from a genuine inquiry. So this is a tricky point that I'm trying to make.
And when you say, sorry to interrupt you, if I may jump in, and when you say soft naturalists try to revise cultural history, do you actually mean that these initiatives have to do with the wrongdoings of humanity throughout history, that they can make up for their mistakes, probably?
Well, the idea is that we
learn from
it would generate a kind of relativism, okay? Because there's no transcendent, okay? And we're also independent of the biological. So we can kind of create ourselves. We create a kind of community.
And maybe learn from our own mistakes. So
we can kind of generate our community. There's no higher power. There's no absolute.
Yeah.
That would say, okay, well, you are objectively wrong. And also, we're not just strictly biological. So there can't be like a natural law, like you would get from like Aristotle. Okay, we generate our culture, and so it would generate a kind of relativism. So my problem is, well, at the same time, the soft naturalists insist on naturalism, that they will not revise that. So wouldn't that be part of our culture as well? And that would also be subject to relativism, to future examination. Yeah, so maybe I think we're going deeper now, and I think we're making progress.
Does soft naturalism? I don't know if the other participants would like to jump in as well and pose a question to Dr. Daniel. Maybe some other researchers that have already joined in. Anytime you can, anybody can jump in and ask Professor Daniel his or her own question.
Hello.
Yes. Is it Aisha?
Yeah. This is Aisha.
How are you?
Yeah.
Hello. How are you? I'm good.
And Aisha is a PhD candidate, right?
Yes. PhD candidate.
And where are you, Aisha?
I'm in Delhi.
Okay.
Delhi.
Very nice.
Delhi
very
University?
nice.
Delhi University. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just have a question.
Sure.
So even I was confused a bit when I was reading a bit about soft naturalism. The thing is, soft naturalism, I think it's an alternative to hard naturalism, and they want to accommodate non-physical phenomena. But the thing is, the explanation they are trying to give for non-physical phenomena is not that convincing to me. But yeah, the way Professor Daniel explained that, the non-physical phenomena, the kind of self we come to have, the culture, it depends on culture and history. So that's okay. But I have one question. You said that, they are naturalists, right? But why are they naturalists? So the thing is, you're saying that culture defines nature. But my, I would like to say that, is that so? Because science claims to define nature. And science, I don't think, is a part of culture. That's why it has this, authority over everything. That's why it claims to, know the objective truth. And science has authority over nature, and it defines nature. So can we say ultimately that culture can, revise and redefine nature? Because if we can do that, then obviously we can accommodate, consciousness, self, free will, morality, everything into soft naturalism without any problem. But the thing is, now the definition of nature by science, it's kind of very limited and materialistic. So this was my question.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. So is science independent of culture? Is science this kind of just objective, factual endeavor that is completely independent of interpretation, of culture? Yeah, so I have a quote here on slide 9. If you could go to slide 9, Dimitrios.
Yeah, of course.
And if you go to the bottom here, I have a quote here that I think will be very interesting to Aisha and maybe to other participants. So I have at the bottom here, the answer to the question, what is the nature of nature, was never a matter of factual discovery, but of competing conceptual posits. Okay? So what is the nature of nature? That's a fundamental metaphysical question. So we look out at the world and we ask, you know, what is nature? Okay. And there's different ways to answer this question. Okay. It's not just a matter of just going out and looking. Okay, it's a factual discovery. Oh, there it is. That's nature. No, it's an interpretation. So over the course of history and in different cultures, there have been different ways of explaining what nature is. So maybe some ancient cultures, they would see like nature as full of gods. Look outside, they see a storm, they see clouds, they see trees. And nature is this place where there's all these gods inhabiting different things. Our idea of nature is much more materialistic. We look outside and we say, okay, there's just these objects. You know, and they're made of matter and they exist in space and time. And that's all there is. But that's not a factual discovery. I see that as an interpretation. I mean, we could think of it in a different way. There's medieval naturalism, which says, okay, I'm going to look outside and I see this physical world. Well, everything in this physical world is contingent. It may or may not exist. And so there must be a necessary being. There must be a being that sustains it all. So the natural points to the supernatural. Okay? So I would say that this idea of science, that I agree with Aisha, this is something that we do encounter. Science is just strictly objective. I don't agree. I think it's a product of human culture, and there are metaphysical assumptions informing it. And right now we're in a certain period where we have this idea that material objects are the fundamental reality. Okay, but that could change. We could have a new idea later on. Like we could think of it in terms of like Berkeley, that material objects don't really exist, that they're actually ideas. So I hope that maybe answers your question, Aisha, or if you would like further clarification.
So in a nutshell, what you're actually saying, Daniel, is that cultural evolution throughout the years have actually revised and reinterpreted nature and science from going from polytheism and materialism to monotheism and more sustainable forms of life, for example. Yeah,
exactly. The very idea of nature is a cultural product. And so my question is, for the soft naturalist, if it is a cultural product, shouldn't we be able to revise it?
Fair enough. Yeah.
And
well,
but they have to be committed to it because they're still naturalist. So that's one of the reasons I see it as an unstable position. So they say, no, we're naturalists. We don't believe in
So in a sense, to what degree, to what extent shall they revise it? Yeah, they've got a very limited perspective of revision. That's what you're saying, because
they're
still naturalists.
They're still naturalists, but at the same time, that's part of culture, and culture should have the ability to revise it and rethink it.
Yeah,
because it's not biological.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes, that's right. Please join in.
Sorry. I also agree that our idea about nature is part of our culture. But why does this mean that science is relativistic? I mean, we have Newton's physics, and then we have Einstein's physics and quantum mechanics. So science changes, indeed, but it's not relativistic because 20th century physics must also include Newton's laws in a way, rephrasing, revising them, but include Newton's laws. So we have a kind of progress in science through change. It's not relativistic. That's my... Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so you're saying that in science, we're reaching some sort of absolute truth. We're making progress, and there is some sort of objective truth we're approximating.
Objective is, yes, is better. Not absolute truth, but objective, yes.
Yeah. Well, I would say science is not metaphysics. So in science, we're observing the empirical world. So we can observe the planets, we can observe biology, and we can gain lots of knowledge about it. But metaphysics would be an inquiry into the basic nature of reality. And this would be an independent question. So we could study the stars and develop observations about them, but there could still be debate about what the ultimate nature of things is. And so I could say that, well, stars are just material phenomena. It's just some sort of chemical explosion that is producing heat and light. But science does not tell us what ultimately the star is. Since science only deals with what is observable, it can't tell us, like, for instance, maybe there's a spiritual being that created the stars. Maybe there's a form, a platonic form. Maybe there's a noumena. Maybe everything is a process. There's no substance. So I think you could have science and you're developing more and more refined observations. But at bottom, the fundamental nature of things, like you could talk about Sankara. Maybe Professor MADHVI would know about this. Sankara says the observation of the plurality is just a partial view of what is fundamentally a unity, non-dualism. So Indian philosophy. So you could have a different metaphysics to account for the same observations. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Have we got any other questions? So far, so good. A lot of explanations.
Hello.
Hi, Aisha.
Yeah, I have one more question. I was just a bit confused. So can we say somewhere that soft naturalism, with the help of its theory, is trying to redefine nature? Because they are putting forward, this theory about, realities like life, consciousness, and they are saying that these immaterial things exist. But they are also saying that this is part of soft naturalism. So are they in a way trying to revise, what naturalism means by admitting the existence of life, consciousness, and all these, epiphenomena? Can we say that?
Yeah, it's a certain account of nature that it includes a non-reducible level of value, of consciousness, but at the same time, there's no separate layer from the natural. So it's they're not going to say there's a soul, there's no real immaterial soul. There's no consciousness that is independent of the physical. But nevertheless, it's still an irreducible phenomenon. So that's how I understand it, so it's trying to steer it's trying to thread a needle that's very, very hard, and I think it's actually impossible.
Okay,
so I say here,
thank you.
So that the absoluteness of value cannot be an ontological transcendence. So that point here, the idea of value cannot be a literal entity. So like you could say that, okay, we have values, that comes from some sort of divine image or some sort of supernatural orientation. Like good and bad would be, we're moving closer to God. The soft naturalist says, no, that's not the case. It is still a form of naturalism. But value is nevertheless not reducible. It's still absolute. Yeah.
Very nice. I'd like to also ask a question about the principle of causal reality, as well as that of deterministic causation, to explain the universe and its origin, as a matter of fact. Now, instead of having an infinite regress to the past, where there's no actual beginning, no matter how hard we try, or instead of having a beginning with no explanation, or even a phased viewpoint of God as the creator of the universe, what hard naturalism or soft naturalism tries to do, is it actually a non-religious and at the same time a convenient way of providing such an explanation of causal reality, that there is this initial state and it could not have been otherwise, to relieve the masses, if you want, from a religious kind of interpretation of the origin of the universe?
Yeah, so you're talking about the cosmological argument.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea that there's a first cause.
Exactly.
And this would be medieval naturalism. The idea that there's this, as you go back in time, there has to be a first principle. You can't go on forever. Mm-hmm. And so for the soft naturalist, yeah, they wouldn't accept that idea. We can still have transcendence in a naturalistic framework. And so the idea is you can still be a kind of humanist. You can still value human experiences. So human beings have religious experiences. That's a fact. As a soft naturalist, you could say, yeah, those things are real. but without positing a supernatural entity. So you're asking about practical applications. That would be one of them. You would say, okay, we want to accept the death of God. At the same time, we want to hang on to a kind of humanism.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, regarding human beauty and dignity. So if you see the relation between naturalism and human dignity, there's this notion of human beauty, which has to be finally fully acknowledged and recognized by all of us. Now, if you were to put some meat on the bones of human beauty and dignity, how would you define it?
Well, this is a good question, because human dignity is an abstraction, right? So, what about me that you can see or touch or measure expresses this idea of dignity? It is an intangible. Okay, so where does it come from? If you're an idealist, you could say, well, that comes from the fact that, we are made in the image of God. So this would, imago Dei. We have a dignity because we're from this source of goodness. Or like Plato, you could say, we participate in the forms. But the soft naturalist denies that. But somehow they still want to hang on to this idea. Yes, we have human dignity. It's part of our culture. We create the idea. We generate the idea because we're not strictly biological. But if we create the idea, does it have any foundation at all? Well, they would say, yes, it's in culture. We build it into our ideas and our language. But there's nothing objective about it. It could change from culture to culture. So it does have a kind of relativism to it. Whereas human dignity, you said in a message that it is something that is objective. Like, you can't deny it. This is an idea we have in like human rights.
Yeah.
You may think it's not there, but it is, and you have to respect it, even if you don't want to. So that the idea of Kant, we are not means, we are ends in themselves. So that is something that is true of us, regardless of a culture. So a culture could say, oh, you're not fully human. And it could be like racism or classism. You're not fully human, but it's not true. But does the soft naturalists have a way to explain that? I don't think they do.
Is it possible, actually, based on what you've just said, to enlarge this circle of those who are dignified and worthy of respect, irrespective of color, race, social condition, and religious beliefs? I mean, because you're not less of a human being when whatever the circumstances your experiences are. I mean, because human rights are actually grounded on human dignity, after all, and you have to eventually admit that.
Well, I mean, this is an idea that we have, right? In the Western cultures, we have this idea that there's an intrinsic dignity to the human being, regardless of your status.
Exactly.
You have to respect people. If they could be disabled, they could be old, they could be have different lifestyles. You have to respect people as an absolute.
Exactly. How does naturalism help towards that way?
Well, I don't think it can, because it would say that that's a product of culture. It is not a product of biology or what is transcendent. And so therefore it could be flexible. We could reinvent it. We could come up with a new way of thinking about dignity, and maybe even deny it, or deny it to some certain class of human beings. It would have to be a flexible, provisional idea. And I don't think it can have this idea of an absolute dignity.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard.
Yeah,
it's pretty hard. Yeah,
yeah.
But it is worth trying after all. If you are a believer of soft naturalism.
They try very hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though they're pretty much limited.
Yes.
In their interpretations or reinterpretations of what is already said or interpreted. Yeah, I see. Are there any other questions you'd like to pose on Dr. DAL MONTE?
Yes, Professor. Can I? Is there someone?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It was a very wonderful talk about soft naturalism, reductionism, all these things. And it does make sense because we have a lot of comparison about our values and our sciences that we believe in. So, Professor, my question is basically based on the values itself that you were trying to convey about the values, that values are something that we cannot derive it from anyone or anywhere else. It is something that, kind of gaining from our experiences. It's not totally scientific also. That is what I think you were talking about, that it does not, it's in the scientific worldview, and it is also not like morality, dignity. So people like, let's talk about the people. They generally think that soft is something, very weak or something, but you have totally turned the table. You have totally made it correct to us that soft is not something very weak or something. Soft is very much thoughtful. You said that it is very much critical. It is something which makes us deeply aware, because we know that science can define everything, but sorry, I'm telling opposite. Science cannot define everything, but values, like you give an example of Shakespeare and other philosophers, that they can define everything. So I wanted to actually ask about the free will question. Like you said, that soft naturalism, kind of does not promise afterlife, because it does not need to. It also does not talk much about the soul, right? But when we think thoroughly about ourselves, we still think that it has a meaning. We are discovering a lot of things. Like in a talk, in a conversation with you, you might not know that what I might be taking in. You might want to say something else, but maybe I'm consuming something else. Maybe my experiences around the world, because right now we are in this virtual world, so other world is also interfering in my, my perception. Like whatever is happening around, it is mixing with my perception of what you are saying, right? So in this way, my meaning is totally different than what you are saying to me, and that of which you are not aware of. Okay, so of course, here my choices matters a lot, because if I'm doing the multitasking thing, if I am paying attention to the others also, to you also, then definitely here my choices plays a very important role. Right. So can you just shed light on this purpose of choices in the concept of soft naturalism?
The purpose of choice in soft naturalism?
Yeah.
So, let me, I have a slide here. Let's see. Yeah, so slide 12. If you go to that, Dimitrios. Right here. So I have this. By the way, this philosopher is Joseph Margolis. He's a very interesting figure. I recommend reading his work. Joseph Margolis rejects Kant's notion of the transcendental freedom of an intelligible character, which exercises unconditioned causality in a domain independent of experience, as not even a realistically human form of agency. Okay, so this is the idea of free will, that we have this capacity that is higher than nature. We're not just a product of natural processes. We have like a soul, maybe. And this consciousness or soul is superior to matter. We can shape and mold ourselves through this power. Okay, well, the soft naturalist rejects this idea that we have some sort of supernatural power to mold ourselves and to overcome our biological drives. Okay, so because they deny this form of free will, Kant calls it transcendental freedom, they have to change the way we think of our choices. So our choices would just be a more modest claim. We're not like these creatures that have a spirit that can overcome matter. Instead, we just have different ways of thinking about ourselves. So we don't literally have a power to overcome our biology. We just think of ourselves in certain ways. So there could be a perspective. From the first person perspective, I am doing things. I am thinking about myself as free. I am thinking about myself right now. I want to give a good talk. I'm thinking through my talk. From a third person perspective, from outside, I'm just neurochemical. I'm just like a brain that has certain electrochemical signals going on in the brain. So they're going to reduce the free will to a perspective. Now, my problem, though, is that this is something that the hard naturalist could also accept. That the hard naturalist could say, yeah, we have a certain perspective from which it seems as though we're free. But we're not really free. We're just electrochemical, biological processes. So the idea of a choice for the soft naturalist will be something that is just a perspective, not something that is a genuine causal power. It is just a perspective you take. And that's why I say, well, the hard naturalists could also believe that too, that we have a certain kind of way of explaining ourselves, but nevertheless, we're just physical phenomena. So I hope that answers your question, Professor MADHVI, and but thank you for the good question.
Thank you, Professor. I will think more on this, and if I have a question, I will raise again with you.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
All right, so far so good. I think we've covered most of the issues regarding this. Yeah, I think
maybe we should maybe wrap it up and
yeah.
It's been an hour, but I really appreciate everyone's attendance and
yeah, very nice.
And I want this to be a good working group for anyone who wants to come forward and share their ideas. This is a very good working group for anyone, and we could do something similar with anyone else.
And having said all these, there are minor differences among all these different forms of naturalism, and I wonder if soft naturalism claims to be the middle ground between the scientific worldview and the humanistic worldview, could that be that common thread binding all these different forms together, leaning towards a more beneficial interpretation of human dignity and human beauty? I just wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do. They're trying to include human dignity, human beauty, but they're still rooted in naturalism.
Yeah,
and it's just they really strain to achieve what they're trying to achieve. Yeah.
If there was anything else that could be done, what would that be?
I think you have to pick one. You have to pick either idealism or hard naturalism. So
yeah,
you have to either just reject the irreducibility of value as a hard naturalist, or you have to say that there's some other source of value in some sort of idealistic metaphysics.
Okay, let's have this as food for thought for the next time, and maybe we can come up with any kind of solutions or ideas. That would be great.
Professor,
Okay.
may I ask you last a kind of very personal question?
Sure.
So there is a kind of debate between the science and the values that we all know. Generally, people say that science is needed to understand the world, but today whatever professor has said has totally changed my opinions on it. It made us to rethink on that, does science really help us to understand the world, or is it culture, values, and philosophy that helps to understand the world more? Because we know very well that all these philosophies help us to understand myself and others, but does it also help us to understand the world? So what's your thought on this? And I think we can wind up.
Yeah. So the idea is there's a view called scientism. Scientism is the view that science can explain everything. But my view is that science is a product of culture. It is not metaphysics. So, and I was saying this to DESPOINA, you can't use science to explain the ultimate nature of reality. And so you have to have philosophy. And you can see that in our very self, in our self. Science cannot access our consciousness. You can't use a microscope to look at someone's thoughts. You can only see the brain, but the thoughts are hidden to science. So our very self suggests that there's an ultimate reality that science cannot account for. And so you do need to have philosophy, metaphysics to fully understand reality. You can't just use science.
Yeah, I mean, looking things from an interdisciplinary perspective, that would be the ideal thing to do, after all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. It helps a lot.
You're welcome, Professor MADHVI. Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts before we close?
Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you so much, Dusan. Thank you, Aisha, for your attendance.
So thank you all for attending. DESPOINA MANDRATZI from Athens, Greece.
Thank you, Dr.
Dr. MADHVI Prasad from India. Aisha, also from New Delhi, India, and Dusan from Serbia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Thank you all for attending today's session. Professor Daniel DAL MONTE helped us by giving us all the necessary details and explanations regarding soft naturalism and human dignity. It was a very productive session, and hope to meet again in the near future, dealing with another interesting issue.
Thank you so much, Dimitrios.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night to all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay.